Guess who's back from the dead and knocking on his own front door? Hwang Jae-min, that's who, and he's brought company. The kind of company that doesn't need to breathe. Moonlight catches the edge of his cloak as he steps onto the stone path leading to the Dongcheon estate gates, his boots crunching against frozen gravel with every deliberate step. Behind him, the air ripples like heat over a summer road, and figures begin to push through the veil separating the living from the dead, their translucent forms flickering in and out of sight. Two guards posted at the main gate snap to attention, their hands flying to their sword hilts as they squint into the darkness, trying to make sense of what they're seeing. One of them barks out a challenge, demanding the stranger identify himself, his voice cracking just a little when the phantom shapes behind Jae-min solidify into armored soldiers with hollow, burning eyes. Jae-min doesn't slow down. He doesn't even blink. Instead, he flicks two fingers forward, and a vengeful spirit with a gaping wound across its throat launches itself through the air, passing straight through the first guard's body and ripping the sword clean out of his grip. The weapon clatters against the cobblestones, and both guards stumble backward, their faces draining of color as the ghost turns to face them, its jaw unhinging in a silent scream. Jae-min walks past them like they're furniture, the massive wooden gates groaning as two more spirits press their spectral hands against the oak and shove them open from the inside, the iron hinges screaming in protest. The courtyard stretches before him, lit by flickering torchlight and the pale glow of a half-moon overhead, exactly as he remembers it from the night they dragged him out in chains 6 years ago. Servants freeze mid-task, dropping buckets and linens as the ghostly procession marches through the main gate. A column of dead soldiers fanning out behind their living commander like a general returning from a war nobody else survived. A kitchen maid screams and bolts for the servant quarters, her sandals slapping against the stone as she runs, and Jae-min lets her go. He's not here for the help. The heavy doors to the inner hall burst open, and out strides Hwang Min-jun, his half-brother, dressed in silk robes worth more than most villages, and flanked by a squad of 12 household guards in polished armor. Min-jun's face twists from confusion to recognition to pure, ugly contempt in the span of 3 heartbeats. And then he laughs, throwing his head back like someone just told him the funniest joke in the kingdom. He asks if the disgraced bastard really crawled back just to die a second time, gesturing at his guards to form up and draw their blades. The guards obey, steel singing against scabbards as 12 swords level themselves at Jae-min's chest. And Min-jun keeps talking, saying the family doesn't even speak the traitor's name anymore, that the dogs ate better scraps than what Jae-min deserves. Our boy lets him finish. Then he raises his left hand and curls his fingers into a claw, and the temperature in the courtyard drops so fast that frost spiderwebs across the flagstones, everyone's breath misting white as something massive shifts in the darkness behind him. A vengeful captain materializes at his side, a spirit twice the size of the others, its armor etched with the sigil of a general who died screaming for reinforcements that never came. And it locks its empty gaze on Min-jun. The guards hesitate. Min-jun's grin falters just slightly before he forces it back into place and orders his men to cut the ghost down, screaming at them that it's just a trick, some cheap sorcery bought from a back-alley mage. One guard actually charges, which is honestly impressive in a very stupid way, and the vengeful captain backhands him across the courtyard without even drawing its weapon, the man bouncing off a stone wall and crumpling into a heap. The other 11 guards suddenly find their boots very interesting, inching backward as the captain turns its attention to the heir of the Hwang family. Min-jun draws his own sword now, a fancy blade with gold filigree that's clearly never seen a real fight, and settles into a stance that looks impressive if you've only ever sparred with instructors who let you win. Jae-min speaks for the first time since arriving, his voice calm and flat, telling his half-brother to put the sword down before he embarrasses himself further. Min-jun lunges anyway, and it's almost sad how slow he is. The vengeful captain intercepts him mid-charge, its spectral hand closing around Min-jun's sword arm and squeezing, the sleeve of those expensive silk robes tearing as the spirit lifts the air clean off his feet and slams him face down into the flagstones. Min-jun gasps, the wind knocked out of him, his fancy sword skittering across the ground and out of reach. The guards make a collective decision not to intervene, and honestly, that's the smartest thing they've done all night. Jae-min walks over to his half-brother, crouching down so they're at eye level, while the vengeful captain keeps the man pinned flat, its ghostly knee planted between his shoulder blades. Min-jun spits curses into the stone, thrashing uselessly, calling Jae-min a demon worshipper and a corpse thief, and every other insult he picked up from their father's dinner table. The vengeful captain twists Min-jun's arm behind his back, and the wet pop of a shoulder dislocating echoes across the courtyard, sharp and final, like a branch snapping under heavy snow. Min-jun screams, not the dignified roar of a warrior taking a hit, but the high, ragged shriek of a pampered noble who has never felt real pain in his entire soft life. And the sound of it bounces off the manor walls and climbs into the night sky. Jae-min watches his half-brother sob into the flagstones, drool mixing with dirt on his cheek, and there's no satisfaction in his expression, just a cold, patient certainty, like a farmer checking the weather before the harvest. He tells Min-jun that the arm will heal, assuming someone pops it back in before the swelling gets too bad. And then he stands up and turns to face the manor's main doors. The surviving guards have backed all the way to the servants' quarters now, and the servants themselves are peeking through windows and cracked doors, watching the ghost army hold formation in their courtyard, as if the dead have always belonged here. Maybe they do. Maybe the dead have been waiting under this estate for years, buried in shallow graves and forgotten cellars, just hoping someone would come along who could finally hear them screaming. Jae-min takes a breath, and he feels the familiar cold ache in his chest, the tiny thread of his own soul that he sacrificed to bind the captain, a cost that will add up over time, but right now feels like the best trade he's ever made. He keeps walking, stepping over his half-brother's crumpled form as Min-jun continues to weep and curse into the ground, his injured arm twisted at an ugly angle against his back. The courtyard stretches wider now, the ghost army parting to let their commander pass, and the moonlight catches the spectral armor of 40 dead soldiers standing at silent attention, waiting for the next order that will spill from his lips. This is just the first 5 minutes of his homecoming, and Jae-min hasn't even gotten to the good part yet. The main doors to the Hwang Manor loom ahead, carved with the family crest, a crest they stripped from him when they branded him a traitor and threw him into the wilderness to die. He reaches out and presses his palm flat against the wood, feeling the warmth of lantern light seeping through the cracks, hearing the muffled voices of people who've been living in his house, spending his inheritance, pretending he never existed. The carved wood is warm under his palm. Lantern light bleeds through the cracks, golden and indifferent. And then Jae-min pushes. The doors don't slam open, nothing dramatic like that. They just swing inward, smooth and silent on oiled hinges, revealing the great hall of the Hwang estate in all its warm, expensive, stolen glory. Braziers line the walls, their flames licking high, and the long table at the center is still set for dinner. Half-eaten plates of roasted duck and pickled radish, cups of rice wine abandoned mid-sip, the family crest glinting on every napkin ring. His father's household has been feasting, while Jae-min's been crawling out of a shallow grave. The servants inside freeze first. An old woman carrying a tray of teacups drops the whole thing, porcelain shattering across the floor, and the sound of it cracks through the hall like a gunshot. A young steward presses himself against the wall, mouth open, staring at the ghostly figures filing through the doors behind the exiled son. Everyone in this room knows his face. Everyone in this room pretended he never existed. Jae-min steps onto the polished floor, his boots leaving smears of courtyard mud on the wood, and he looks around at the tapestries and the gilded panels and the ancestral shrine in the corner where his own nameplate has been removed. Then he speaks. His voice isn't loud, but it carries anyway, the acoustics of the hall doing the work for him. He tells them he's here to take back everything. Every brick, every ledger, every scrap of silk and silver that belongs to the Hwang name. And he's not asking. Nobody moves. The ghost army fans out behind him in a slow, silent tide. Spectral figures positioning themselves at the doors and the windows and the staircases, cutting off every exit without a single word being exchanged. The servants stay frozen. One of the kitchen girls starts crying silently, tears tracking down her cheeks, and Jae-min sees her but doesn't acknowledge her. She's not the enemy. She's just someone who got caught in a house built on lies. A door at the far end of the hall creaks open, not the dramatic slam of an outraged patriarch, just a quiet, measured creak, because Hwang Jae-min has always preferred to make his entrances look accidental. He steps out of his study, still holding a cup of tea, as if his eldest son turning up with an army of the dead is a minor inconvenience he's willing to humor before returning to his ledgers. His robes are immaculate. Deep blue silk with silver embroidery, the kind of outfit that costs more than most villages earn in a year. His gray-streaked hair is pulled back in a topknot secured with a jade pin, and his face is calm, composed. The face of a man who has buried secrets deeper than most people will ever dig. Jin-tae takes a sip of his tea before he even looks at his son. Then he sets the cup down on a passing servant's tray, slow and deliberate. And when he finally speaks, his voice is rich with the kind of authority you only get from decades of never being told no. He calls Jae-min's return an act of treason against the Hwang family and the kingdom itself. He says the boy was exiled for consorting with dark forces, a crime that carries the death penalty, and now he's proven the charges true by dragging corpses onto sacred ground. Every word lands like a hammer on an anvil, precise and heavy, and designed to leave no room for argument. The servants shrink further into the walls. The guards who haven't already scattered look to their lord, waiting for the order they know is coming. Jin-tae lifts his chin and tells them to attack, his voice ringing off the rafters, and for a moment the hall holds its breath. Then Jae-min does something his father isn't expecting. He doesn't draw a weapon. He doesn't summon more ghosts. He just raises his hand, palm open, and calls a name. A name that makes the color drain from Hwang Jin-tae's face faster than any blade ever could. The name of a servant, not a soldier, not a noble, just a kitchen boy who died 6 years ago in a supposed accident that everyone in this house knew wasn't an accident at all. The ghost that answers is small, young, maybe 15, with the kind of thin shoulders that come from a lifetime of not getting enough to eat. His spectral form materializes in the center of the hall, translucent and trembling, and the servants who knew him in life gasp and clutch at each other. The old woman who dropped the teacups sinks to her knees. The kitchen girl stops crying and just stares. Jae-min looks at the ghost of the murdered servant boy and asks him one question. He asks who killed him. The answer comes in a voice that sounds like wind through broken reeds, thin and hollow, and ancient beyond its years. And every single person in that hall hears it. The boy points a ghostly finger at Hwang Jin-tae and says the patriarch ordered his death because he overheard a conversation about embezzled tax, funds meant for the royal treasury. Jin-tae had him beaten in the cellar and left to bleed out, and then the family announced it was a fall down the stairs, a tragic accident. A clumsy servant boy who couldn't keep his footing. The silence that follows is absolute. Even the braziers seem to dim. The visiting nobles in attendance, minor lords and distant cousins who came for dinner and got a horror show instead, turned to stare at the patriarch with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed disgust. One of them, an elderly man with a long white beard and the insignia of a provincial magistrate, stands up from his seat so fast his chair tips over backward. He demands to know if this is true, his voice cracking with outrage, and the ghost of the kitchen boy just keeps pointing, his hollow eyes fixed on the man who murdered him. Jin-tae's composure shatters like the teacups on the floor. He screams at the guards to attack, his voice going shrill and ragged, nothing like the measured authority of a moment ago. He tells them to cut down the demon worshipper and his filthy lies, and every other desperate thing a guilty man says when the truth finally corners him. The guards hesitate. Some of them look at the ghost boy. Some of them look at each other. But Jin-tae is still the patriarch, and his voice still carries the weight of years of power. And eventually the bravest or stupidest of them raise their weapons and charge. Jae-min doesn't flinch. The vengeful captain steps forward to meet them, its massive spectral blade cutting an arc through the air, and the first wave of guards goes down hard. Not dead. The captain doesn't kill them. It just swats them aside with the kind of casual violence that says it could end them if it wanted to. And the ones who survive the initial impact scramble backward with their weapons shaking in their hands. The second wave hesitates. The third wave doesn't form at all. An elite guard, a man with a scar across his jaw and the bearing of someone who's seen real combat, slips through the chaos and closes the distance. He's fast. Faster than the others, trained better, and his blade catches the moonlight through a high window as he swings. Jae-min twists, but the edge still catches him. A shallow cut across his forearm that opens his sleeve and sends a bright line of blood arcing through the air. Not deep, not dangerous, but it's the first time he's bled tonight, and the sight of it makes Jin-tae's guards rally just a little. It also makes the vengeful captain very, very angry. The spirit turns, its empty gaze locking onto the elite guard, and the man's nerve breaks instantly. He drops his sword and backs away, hands raised, and the captain lets him go. Jae-min presses his palm against the bleeding cut, his expression flat and unbothered. And then he lifts his hand and shows the blood to his father, like an accusation written in red. The blood hits the floor in a slow drip, red on polished wood. And the vengeful captain loses whatever restraint was holding it back. Its spectral blade comes up in a two-handed grip, and the temperature in the hall drops so fast, breath starts misting from every open mouth. The elite guard who cut Jae-min tries to run. He doesn't make it 3 steps. The captain's sword catches him across the back, and he goes sprawling, his weapon clattering away, his legs refusing to work the way he wants them to. The captain doesn't kill him either. It just picks him up by the collar and hurls him through a rice paper screen, and the man crashes into a dining table on the other side with a sound like a cart tipping over. The remaining guards stop charging, every single one of them. Jae-min presses his sleeve against the cut on his forearm, and the bleeding is already slowing, the wound shallower than it looked, and he turns his head and spits on the floor. Then he walks forward. Just walks, right past the frozen guards, right past the overturned chairs and shattered teacups, and the old magistrate who hasn't moved since his chair fell. Over, right toward the inner doors of the manor. Nobody stops him. Min-jun is still on the ground where the ghost pinned him, his dislocated arm twisted at a bad angle, his face wet with tears and snot and rage. He screams at Jae-min as he passes. He screams that he's a dead man walking, that their father will bury him properly this time, that he'll dig the grave himself. Jae-min doesn't look at him. He just keeps walking, and the inner doors swing open ahead of him, as if pushed by invisible hands. 2 more ghosts, a pair of dead household guards who served the family for 20 years before Jin-tae had them executed for asking too many questions, materialize to flank the doorway. Jae-min steps through, and the doors slam shut behind him. The hall he enters now is darker, thicker with old incense and older secrets. His footsteps echo on the stone floor, and the ghosts ahead of him fan out, scouting, their spectral forms passing through walls and returning with nothing to report. The guards aren't following yet. They're still in the main hall trying to figure out if they're more afraid of the patriarch or the dead. Jae-min knows he doesn't have long before they get their nerve back. He needs to find something, anything, a weapon or a secret or a bargaining chip, something his father values more than his own reputation. The kitchen boy's ghost appears beside him, small and silent, and tugs at his sleeve with fingers that pass right through the fabric. It wants him to follow. Jae-min does. He follows the ghost through a narrow servants' corridor behind the main hall, through a storage room stacked with rice sacks and clay jars, all the way to a heavy iron door set into the floor of what used to be the wine cellar. He's never seen this door before. He spent his whole childhood in this manor, and he never once saw this door. The kitchen boy points at it and then fades, his energy spent, his ghost too weak to stay manifest any longer. Jae-min crouches and runs his fingers over the iron. It's old. Older than the manor, older than the Hwang bloodline that built this place. And the metal is cold in a way that has nothing to do with the autumn air. There's a seal carved into it. Not a lock, not a latch, a seal, the kind monks use to bind spirits and ward against the undead. Its characters worn nearly smooth by centuries of sitting in the dark. Jae-min recognizes the pattern from books he read as a boy, back when his father still let him into the library. It's a containment seal. Something is trapped under this door. He presses his palm flat against the iron, and the seal flares once. A dull red pulse that lights up the cellar like a dying ember. And then the light goes out, and the door just opens. No resistance, no explosion of dark energy or screaming spirits or any of the things the books warned him about. Just an iron door swinging open on hinges that haven't moved in 100 years, silent as a held breath. Beneath it is a staircase, stone steps worn in the middle from feet that walked here long before the manor was built. Jae-min descends. The vengeful captain follows close behind him, its blade casting pale light that flickers against the walls, and two more ghosts take up positions at the top of the stairs to guard his retreat. The air gets colder the deeper he goes. Then it gets hot. Then it gets cold again. A cycle, like something breathing. At the bottom of the stairs is a chamber, small, circular, walls covered in more seals, dozens of them, layer upon layer of warding characters written in ink that still gleams fresh after centuries. And in the center of the chamber, set into the floor, a single stone tablet. Jae-min approaches it. He can feel the power radiating off it, a low thrum that vibrates in his teeth and makes his ghost allies flicker like candle flames in a draft. This thing is old, older than the seal on the door, older than the kingdom that built this manor, older than anything human hands ever should have touched. He kneels and puts his hand on the tablet. The moment his skin makes contact, the world whites out. Not a vision, not a memory, something else entirely. A surge of raw necromantic energy floods into him, cold and hot and ancient and hungry, and his ghost army across the manor reacts instantly. The vengeful captain swells, its form sharpening from translucent mist into something almost solid, its armor gaining definition, and its blade gleaming with actual light instead of pale suggestion. The other ghosts strengthen too. The dead guards at the door grow taller, broader, their features resolving until they look almost alive again. The kitchen boy's spirit, depleted and fading only moments ago, reignites like someone poured oil on a dying fire. And somewhere in the forest beyond the estate walls, something very old opens its eyes. The surge ends as abruptly as it began. Jae-min gasps and pulls his hand back, his fingers smoking just a little, and the tablet under his palm crumbles to dust. The seals on the walls flicker. One of them goes dark. The others hold, but they're weaker now, gaps in the containment that weren't there before. And whatever the tablet was sealing feels closer than it did a minute ago. Jae-min staggers to his feet. His arm doesn't hurt anymore. The cut is gone, healed over, not even a scar. And the exhaustion that had been creeping into his bones since he first summoned the ghost army is gone too. Whatever that tablet was, it fed him. It gave him power he didn't earn and doesn't understand. He glances at the crumbling dust on the floor and wonders if he just made a terrible mistake. Then he hears shouting from above, and the moment for wondering is over. He climbs the stairs fast, the strengthened ghosts around him moving with a silence that feels sharper than before. And when he emerges from the cellar, the manor is in chaos. Jin-tae has regrouped. Reinforcements from the garrison in the lower village, men who weren't in the hall for the ghost's testimony, have arrived at the gate with torches and steel. Jae-min can hear them forming up in the courtyard, at least 40 men, their boots pounding the flagstones in rhythm. He could fight them. With the power surge from the tablet, his ghosts are strong enough to take 40 men, but a colder part of him, the part that survived being dead and dragged himself back from whatever pit his father threw him into, recognizes that fighting here and now is stupid. He doesn't know how long the power surge will last. He doesn't know what the tablet was or what breaking it will cost him. And he definitely doesn't know what's waking up in the forest. Time to leave. He gestures to his ghosts, and they flow around him like water, a protective formation, and he slips out through a side door into the herb garden, while Jin-tae's reinforcements are still organizing in the front courtyard. The garden is dead. It's been dead for years, ever since Jae-min's mother was still alive to tend it, and now it's just bare earth and withered stalks and a single dead plum tree in the corner. Jae-min crosses through it without looking back. Two ghosts clear the outer wall before he reaches it, scouting the tree line for any sign of an ambush, and the vengeful captain steps through the wall itself and holds its blade at guard while Jae-min clambers over the stones. Then he's in the forest. The cold night air hits him, clean and sharp after the incense-choked halls of the manor, and he runs. He runs until the torchlight of the estate is a distant glow behind him, until the shouting fades to silence, until his legs burn and his lungs ache. He runs until the ghosts around him start whispering that he's far enough, that the pursuit hasn't followed, that he can stop now. He stops, leans against a pine tree and tries to catch his breath. The ghosts fan out in a perimeter, silent sentinels among the shadows. And for a few minutes there's nothing but the sound of wind through the branches and the distant hoot of an owl. Then the owl stops hooting and the wind dies, and the forest goes very, very still. Jae-min pushes off the tree, and his hand goes to the dagger at his belt, the one he took from a dead guard 3 hours and a lifetime ago. A light appears between the trees ahead of him. Pale blue, cold, not firelight, not torchlight. Spirit light. A ghost is coming, but not one of his. This one is old, impossibly old, ancient in a way that makes the vengeful captain look like a newborn. And when it drifts into view, Jae-min understands why the forest went silent. The spirit is a woman, tall, regal, wearing robes in a style that hasn't been fashionable for 300 years. Her hair pinned up with jade ornaments that don't exist anymore. Her face pale and perfect, and utterly expressionless. She stops 10 paces from him. The vengeful captain moves to intercept, and she ignores it completely, her gaze fixed on Jae-min with an intensity that makes his skin prickle. She speaks. Her voice doesn't sound like wind through reeds or any of the other ghost voices he's heard tonight. Her voice sounds like a bell, clear and resonant and very, very old. She tells him he woke something when he touched the tablet. She tells him there's a graveyard in the hills to the east, a place the locals won't go near and the priests won't bless, where a warlord who died badly 3 centuries ago is buried with his entire army. She tells him the seal he cracked was keeping that warlord asleep, and now, thanks to him, the warlord is waking up. Jae-min stares at her. She stares back. He asks who she is. She tells him her name was Seol-hwa, and in life she was a sorceress who served the warlord, and in death she's been waiting for someone dumb enough or desperate enough to crack that seal. She says it without malice, almost with approval, like he passed some kind of test he didn't know he was taking. She tells him the warlord's name was General Beck, and if Jae-min wants to survive what's coming, he's going to need the general's army. She tells him where to find the graveyard, and then she fades, her form dissolving into cold mist, and the forest sounds come rushing back all at once like someone unplugged his ears. Jae-min stands in the dark with his ghosts around him, and his hand still on his dagger, and thinks about what he just learned. A warlord's army, waking up because of him. The surge from the tablet is still humming in his blood, his ghosts still strengthened and sharp, but he knows it won't last. He needs that army. He turns east and starts walking. Back at the estate, Hwang Jae-min is not sleeping. The guards couldn't find Jae-min. The ghosts vanished into the forest, and the tracking dogs refused to follow, whimpering and pulling at their leashes until the handlers gave up. Min-jun's arm has been set and splinted, and he's in his chambers being fed poppy milk by a terrified servant. And Jin-tae is alone in his study with a half-empty bottle of rice wine and a rage so deep he can barely breathe. He stares at the wall where a tapestry of the Hwang family crest hangs. And then he reaches for a writing brush and a sheet of parchment. He writes 3 letters. The first is to the royal magistrate in the provincial capital, denouncing Jae-min as a necromancer and a traitor. The second is to the abbot of the White Crane Monastery, requesting an exorcist be dispatched immediately. The third is to Lord Kwon Do-yoon, head of House Kwon, the family that has been allied with the Hwangs for 3 generations. The letter to Kwon is the longest. Jin-tae tells him that a threat to House Hwang is a threat to their alliance, that Jae-min's return endangers all the arrangements they've made, that they need to act together and act fast. He seals it with his personal ring and calls for his fastest rider. The man is in the saddle before dawn, galloping west toward the Kwon estates with a letter that will change the course of everything. And in the forest east of the manor, Jae-min walks through the dark with a dead sorceress's directions burned into his memory and a ghost army bristling around him. He doesn't know what he'll find at the graveyard. He doesn't know if General Beck will bow or fight. He only knows he's running out of time, and the tablet's power is already starting to fade. The ghosts are still strong, but not as strong as they were an hour ago. His arm, healed so completely, now aches with a phantom pain that feels like a warning. Something is coming. Something bigger than a vengeful patriarch and his hired guards. And if he wants to face it, he needs an army that can match it. The graveyard is somewhere up ahead, hidden in a valley the maps don't name. Jae-min keeps walking. The valley isn't on any map. Jae-min pushes through a wall of dead thorn bushes, and there it is. A bowl of black earth sunk between 2 hills like a wound that never closed. No birds, no wind, just silence and the smell of iron and old rot and something else, something cold that has nothing to do with the night air. The ghosts around him go still. Even the vengeful captain, who hasn't shut up since the forest, falls completely silent. Jae-min steps forward, and the ground changes under his feet. Soft black soil giving way to cracked stone, and that's when he sees them. Gravestones, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, tilted at drunken angles and covered in moss so thick he can't read the names. Some are just broken stubs. Some are mounds of piled rock with no marker at all. And at the far end of the valley, rising out of the dark like a shipwreck, a stone tomb the size of a small fortress. Its entrance a black mouth lined with crumbling pillars. Jae-min's arm throbs. The phantom pain from the wound that healed hours ago is back, sharper now, and he knows what that means. The tablet's surge is nearly gone. Whatever strength it gave him is bleeding out fast, and he's standing in a dead warlord's front yard with nothing but fading ghosts and a dagger. Guess what he does next? He walks straight toward the tomb. The ground trembles. Not an earthquake, something worse. Something that moves under the soil in waves. And then the gravestones start to crack. Earth splits open in a dozen places at once. Hands push through, bone fingers gripping the edges of their own graves. And then the soldiers rise. They don't climb out like living men. They unfold, bodies assembling from shadow and rot, and centuries of hatred. Armor rusted but still holding its shape. Weapons dull but still sharp enough. Rank after rank pulls itself from the dirt. Archers with bows that shouldn't still have strings. Spearmen with broken banners hanging from their poles. Cavalry officers whose horses are just skeletons now, eye sockets glowing with the same cold blue light that fills the valley. Hundreds of them, a full army, silent and motionless, waiting. Jae-min stops walking. His own ghosts have pulled back. The vengeful captain actually retreating a step. And he's never seen that happen before. The tomb doors don't open so much as they unmake themselves, stone crumbling inward, like something on the other side just breathed. And out of that darkness walks General Beck. He's not what Jae-min expected, not a monster, not a screaming revenant, not some bloated corpse dragged out of legend. He's just a man in old armor, tall and lean, his face gaunt but still handsome in a hollow way, his eyes the same cold blue as his soldiers but brighter, much brighter. He carries a sword that's taller than Jae-min, the blade dark with something that isn't rust. And when he stops at the edge of his army, he studies Jae-min like a farmer studying a strange new crop. The silence stretches. Jae-min doesn't bow. The general tilts his head just slightly, and then he moves. No warning, no speech, no challenge. One moment he's 20 paces away, and the next his sword is coming down, and Jae-min barely gets his dagger up in time, the impact ringing through his whole body like a bell. The force of it drives him to one knee. His ghosts surge forward, and the general's army doesn't even flinch, the front rank just stepping into formation like they've done this 1,000 times. And Jae-min realizes he's not fighting one warlord, he's fighting all of them. The general's sword sweeps sideways, and Jae-min throws himself flat, the blade passing close enough to shave frost off his collar. He rolls, comes up swinging, his dagger catching the general's armored forearm and skidding off without leaving a scratch. Bad sign. The general's face doesn't change. No anger, no amusement, no anything. Just that cold blue stare, and that impossible sword, and the weight of 3 centuries pressing down on every strike. Jae-min's ghosts try to flank him, and the spectral soldiers intercept them, blade against blade, centuries of discipline against raw vengeance, and his ghosts are losing ground fast. The vengeful captain takes a spear through the chest and flickers. Jae-min feels it, a sharp pull somewhere behind his ribs, the soul fragment he gave that spirit screaming in protest. He can't win this as a brawl. He needs a pact. And to make a pact with something like this, he needs to prove he's worth binding. So he does something stupid. He drops his dagger. The general pauses. It's only a heartbeat, barely a flicker, but it's enough. Jae-min closes his eyes and reaches out with the part of himself that talks to the dead. The part that Sil-hwa called a talent, and his father called an abomination. And he pours everything he has left into one word. Submit. The general's sword stops an inch from Jae-min's skull, the cold blue eyes narrow. And then the general speaks, his voice like gravel grinding under a glacier. He asks what makes this boy, this child with borrowed ghosts and a fading spark, worthy of commanding him. Jae-min opens his eyes. He doesn't flinch. He tells the general exactly what he's fighting for: the estate, the betrayal, the father who framed him, and the brother who laughed while he was dragged away. And he tells him that the seal was already cracking before he touched it. He tells him Sol Hwa sent him. That name lands. The general's sword lowers an inch, and Jae-min keeps talking, keeps pushing. Tells him that the world above this valley has forgotten him, but it hasn't forgotten how to bleed. Tells him there's a war coming, and if the general wants a chance to be remembered as something more than a ghost in a dead valley, this is it. The silence comes back, and then the general laughs. It's not a warm sound. It's the sound of old stone breaking, of something that hasn't felt humor in 300 years remembering how. He says the boy has teeth. He says he hasn't seen a living man with that much gall since the last king he served died badly. He says one condition. Jae-min asks what it is. The general says he won't be bound to a weak vessel, that if Jae-min's soul cracks under the weight, the pact breaks, and the general takes what's left. No second chances. No mercy. Jae-min says, deal. The general drives his sword into the earth between them. Blue fire races up the blade and into the ground, and then into Jae-min, cold so absolute it burns, and he feels the pact seal itself into his bones. The soul fragment that anchors it is the biggest one yet, a chunk torn out of him that leaves him gasping, his vision swimming, his knees buckling. But when he looks up, the general is kneeling. The whole army kneels with him, thousands of spectral soldiers, ranks upon ranks, stretching back into the dark. All of them bowing to a half-dead boy with a borrowed dagger and blood running from his nose. Jae-min wipes his face with the back of his hand. He stands up. He tells them to rise. And just like that, he has an army that can match anything his father throws at him. The cost is still humming in his chest, like a wound that won't close. His heartbeat skipping every third beat, his fingers numb. But it's done. The ride back toward the estate takes 2 days. Jae-min spends most of it unconscious, slumped over the neck of a horse the general's men found in a raider camp, his ghosts keeping watch while his body tries to adjust to the weight of the warlord's pact. General Baek stays close, not out of loyalty, not yet, but because the pact makes him curious. He watches Jae-min sleep, this boy who cracked a 300-year-old seal and then walked into his valley and demanded his fealty. And something in those cold blue eyes almost looks like interest. On the second night, Kwon Do-yoon makes his move. Jae-min is camped in a hollow west of the estate, still weak, still shaking off the last of the pact sickness, when the general's scouts flicker back with news. Armed men in the tree line, Kwon Banners, at least 50 soldiers, maybe more, moving in a crescent formation designed to close off escape routes before the main thrust hits. They're not here to capture, they're here to end it. Jae-min drags himself upright, his vision still blurry, his legs barely holding, and General Baek watches him with those bright, dead eyes. He asks if the boy can fight. Jae-min says no. He says but he can command. He raises one hand, and General Baek grins, a wolf's grin, all teeth and hunger. And then he turns and faces the tree line and raises his own hand. The ghost army rises out of the dark, like the valley floor, exhaling. Kwon's soldiers don't even have time to scream. The first wave hits the tree line, and the night fills with the sound of steel on steel. Ghost blades passing through living armor like it isn't there. Spirit arrows finding throats and eye sockets with unerring precision. Kwon's archers try to fire back, and their arrows pass straight through the ghosts. Their swordsmen swing at empty air. Their officers shout orders that nobody can follow because the enemy they're fighting isn't alive, isn't solid unless it wants to be, isn't playing by any rules they were trained for. General Baek wades into the thick of it personally. His sword sweeps through 3 men at once, and they drop without a mark on their bodies, their souls just ripped out of them like a page torn from a book. Cold, efficient, terrifying. Jae-min watches from the hollow and feels every death as a pulse in the pact, a strange dark rhythm that's almost soothing. The battle is over in minutes. Kwon Do-yoon's raiding force is either dead or fleeing, and the few who escape will carry stories back to their lord that will keep him awake for weeks. Jae-min tries to stand, and his legs don't answer. The world tilts. General Baek catches him before he hits the ground, and that's when the masked woman steps out of the trees. She's tall and lean, dressed in dark traveling clothes with a sword at her hip, and her face hidden behind a cloth wrap, only her eyes visible. Sharp eyes, eyes that know exactly what she's looking at. She looks at the ghost army drawing back into the shadows. She looks at General Beck holding a half-conscious boy like a broken doll. She looks at the bodies scattered across the forest floor, and then she sighs like this is just another Tuesday. She says his soul is tearing itself apart. She says if he keeps burning it like this, he'll be dead before the week is out. Jae-min tries to push himself up and fails, and she's already moving, already pulling something from her belt. A vial of something that glows faintly gold. She tells him to drink. He asks who she is. She pulls down her face wrap for just a moment, long enough for him to see a woman's face, sharp-jawed and calm, with a small scar under one eye. She says her name is Choi Soo-yeon. She says she's been watching him since the manor. And then she says the king wants a word. He says he doesn't answer to kings. Choi Soo-yeon doesn't even blink. She just stares at him, that golden vial still in her hand, and tells him that's cute. Then she grabs him by the collar and pours the stuff down his throat anyway. Jae-min gags, chokes, tries to shove her off, but his arms aren't working right, and she's a lot stronger than she looks. The liquid burns going down, then goes cold, then spreads through his chest like ice water filling a cracked cup. His heartbeat steadies. The skipping stops. His fingers come back online, tingling like they've been asleep for a year. General Beck watches the whole thing with that wolf grin, clearly entertained by the spectacle of his new master getting manhandled by a woman with a scarf over her face. Jae-min pushes himself upright, finally able to hold his own weight, and asks what was in that vial. Soo-yeon tucks the empty vial back into her belt and says it's refined spirit essence. She says it patches the holes in a soul that's been leaking. Then she says he's got more holes than a fishing net, and if he keeps burning himself like kindling, he won't last another week. Jae-min stares at her. He asks why she cares. She pulls her face wrap back up, only those sharp eyes visible now, and says she already told him. The king wants a word. Our boy laughs, short and bitter. He says the king didn't care when his father framed him for a crime he didn't commit. He didn't care when they threw him out of his own house like garbage. He didn't care when he died. Soo-yeon's eyes narrow. She says the king didn't know he was dead. She says nobody outside the Hwang estate knew anything because Jin-tae buried the truth under a mountain of bribes and lies. But now a dead boy is walking around with a ghost army, and that's the kind of thing the royal court notices. Jae-min struggles to his feet. General Beck steps back, giving him space, those cold blue eyes tracking every movement. The ghost army has pulled back into the shadows now. Ranks of spectral soldiers dissolving into the tree line like mist burning off in morning sun. Only the general stays solid. Jae-min faces Soo-yeon and asks what the king actually wants. She says information first, help second. She says the king has been watching House Hwang for years, suspecting old Jin-tae of things far worse than political backstabbing, things involving rituals and relics, and the kind of darkness that noble families aren't supposed to touch. She says she's been undercover in the region for 6 months, gathering evidence. And then a dead heir showed up with a vengeance and a spirit army, and suddenly her investigation got a lot more interesting. Jae-min's jaw tightens. He tells her he doesn't need royal help to destroy his father. Soo-yeon tilts her head. She asks if that's why he's currently standing in a forest, with his soul held together by a borrowed potion, and his strongest ghost looking at him, like a puzzle that hasn't solved itself yet. General Beck's grin widens. He actually chuckles, a sound like stones grinding together, and says he likes this woman. Jae-min shoots him a look. The general shrugs, utterly unbothered. Soo-yeon says her offer is simple. She trains him to control the pact properly, so he stops bleeding soul every time he sneezes. And in return, he helps her gather proof of Jin-tae's crimes that will hold up in the royal court. She says, revenge is good, but vengeance that destroys the man's name before it destroys his body is better. Jae-min stares at her for a long moment. His arm still aches from the guard's blade earlier. His chest still hums with the weight of the pact. A constant low thrum, like a second heartbeat that doesn't quite sync. He knows she's right. He barely survived General Beck's binding, and he's been running on fumes ever since. If he tries to storm the estate again in this state, his father won't even need the demon artifact to finish him. He asks what kind of training. Soo-yeon's eyes crinkle above the scarf. She says the kind that hurts. They don't go back to the capital, not yet. Instead, Soo-yeon leads him deeper into the forest, past the cursed graveyard, past the raider camp, into a stretch of wilderness so old and tangled that even the sunlight has trouble reaching the ground. She has a camp hidden there, a lean-to and a fire pit, and a cache of supplies. The setup of someone who's been living rough for months. General Beck drifts alongside them like a second shadow, occasionally flickering out of sight, only to reappear farther ahead, scouting. Jae-min notices that the general's presence doesn't drain him the way it did before. The potion is still working, or maybe the pact is settling, or maybe he's just too tired to feel the difference. Soo-yeon stops in a clearing and turns to face him. She tells him to summon one of his weaker spirits. Just one. He raises a hand and calls forth the ghost of the murdered servant who spoke against Jin-tae at the manor. The spirit materializes, a thin woman in servant's clothes with dark, hollow eyes and a neck that's bent at a wrong angle. Soo-yeon studies the ghost for a moment. Then she asks Jae-min what he feels right now. He says he feels the connection, a thread of his own soul tied to hers. Soo-yeon nods. She says that's the problem. She says every time he summons a spirit, he's tying a new thread, and every time that spirit acts in the world, it pulls on the thread, and the pull rips tiny pieces out of him. That's why he collapses. That's why his heart skips. That's why his vision swims and his legs stop working. She says most necromancers spread the load across multiple anchors, physical objects or living vessels, something that isn't their own soul. He asks, what kind of anchors? She pulls a small carved stone from her belt and tosses it to him. It's cold and smooth, etched with symbols he doesn't recognize. And the moment his fingers close around it, he feels something shift. The thread connecting him to the servant spirit goes slack. Not broken, just looser. The ghost flickers for a second, then steadies. And Jae-min realizes he's still breathing easily. No new ache in his chest, no fresh skip in his pulse. He stares at the stone. Soo-yeon says that's a spirit anchor, a basic one. She says he needs to learn how to make his own, and how to bind his spirits to them so the pact doesn't keep eating him alive. She also says he needs to learn how to distribute the load. Right now he's channeling every spirit through a single point inside himself, which is like trying to run a river through a needle. She says she can teach him to open multiple channels, spread the burden across his whole body instead of focusing it in his chest. It won't make him stronger, but it'll stop him from burning out. Jae-min looks at the stone in his hand, then at the servant spirit still hovering silently, then at General Beck, who's watching from the tree line with arms crossed. He asks how long it takes to learn. Soo-yeon pulls down her face wrap again and gives him a thin smile. She says that depends entirely on how much pain he can take. The training takes 8 days. 8 days of carving symbols into river stones until his fingers bleed. 8 days of sitting in the dark with his eyes closed, feeling for the threads of his own soul, like a blind man searching for spider webs. 8 days of Soo-yeon hitting him with a wooden stick every time his concentration slips. She hits hard. General Beck thinks it's hilarious. On the third day, Jae-min manages to anchor the servant spirit to a stone permanently. The ghost's thread detaches from him completely, rerouting itself in the carved rock. And for the first time since he crawled out of his grave, he feels something release inside his chest. It's not exactly relief, it's more like a knot he didn't know was there, suddenly coming undone. He sits there in the clearing with the stone in his lap, and the ghost hovering beside him like a loyal dog, and just breathes. Soo-yeon doesn't congratulate him. She just tosses him another blank stone and tells him to do it again, faster this time. By the 5th day, he can anchor a spirit in under an hour. By the 7th day, he's learned to open 3 channels instead of 1, the drain spreading through his shoulders and his legs and his gut instead of all crushing into his heart. He summons 5 spirits at once and stays on his feet. His vision stays clear. His pulse stays steady. General Beck watches him with something that almost looks like respect. The general says he's seen warlords twice Jae-min's age who couldn't manage that. Our boy wipes sweat off his forehead and asks if that's a compliment. General Beck says it's an observation. Soo-yeon, sharpening her sword by the fire, says it's progress. She says he's still burning soul every time he uses the spirits, but now he's burning it slow and steady, instead of all at once. A candle instead of a bonfire. She says it'll buy him time, maybe years if he's careful. Then she looks up from her blade and says, it's time to move. Jae-min asks where. she says back to the estate. She says Lord Min Seok-jin, a noble from the capital with actual authority and no loyalty to Jin-tae, is attending a feast at the Hwang Manor in 2 days. She says if they want to expose Jin-tae's crimes in front of someone who can do something about it, that's the moment. Jae-min stands up. His ghosts are anchored now, their threads tied to stones in his pocket instead of holes in his soul. General Baek is solid and sharp and hungry at his back. The servant spirit has a voice that can testify. He tells Soo-yeon he's ready. She sheathes her sword and says, "Good." She says, "This is going to get ugly." The feast hall of the Hwang estate is a grand room with high ceilings and silk banners and long tables loaded with food that costs more than most villagers make in a year. Jin-tae sits at the head of the table, his wife beside him. Min-jun slouched in a chair with his arm still in a sling from where Jae-min dislocated it. Guests are nobles from neighboring houses, minor lords and their wives, and one man who stands out from the rest. Lord Min Seok-jin is older, gray-haired, with a face that's seen too much politics to be impressed by fancy food and pretty banners. He sits near the middle of the table, eating slowly, watching everything. Jin-tae is in the middle of a toast, raising his cup to honor the alliance with House Kwon, when the main doors blow open. Not pushed, blown like a wind hit them, both heavy wooden doors slamming against the walls with a crack that silences the entire room. Jae-min walks through. He's wearing dark traveling clothes instead of noble silks, his hair still tangled from the forest, the healed wound on his arm, a pale scar against his skin. Behind him, the ghost of the murdered servant drifts like smoke. Behind her, General Baek in full armor, his sword drawn, his blue eyes burning. Behind him, a dozen more spirits filling the doorway, their hollow faces staring into the feast hall like it's a tomb they've been waiting to enter. The guests freeze. Someone drops a cup. Min-jun goes absolutely white. Jin-tae stands up so fast his chair tips over backward. He screams at the guards to seize the intruder. Jae-min doesn't even look at them. He raises one hand, and the spirits spread out along the walls, surrounding the table, cutting off every exit. Nobody moves. Lord Min watches with narrow eyes, his wine glass still in his hand, his expression unreadable. Jae-min walks forward, his boots loud on the polished floor, and stops at the center of the hall. He points at his father. He says he's not here to fight. He says he's here to let the dead speak. The servant spirit drifts forward. Her broken neck tilts. Her hollow eyes fix on Jin-tae, and she opens her mouth. Lord Min's cup stops halfway to his mouth. His eyes narrow. The servant spirit drifts closer to his seat, her head tilted at that awful angle, and she starts to talk. She speaks in a voice like wind through dead leaves, thin and cold and utterly certain. She names the room she died in. She names the month, the day, the exact hour Jin-tae's blade went into her throat. She says she witnessed the Lord bury a ledger in the eastern courtyard under the old persimmon tree. She says that ledger contains records of bribes paid to the provincial tax office to falsify the estate's accounts. She says Jin-tae has been skimming silver from the royal treasury for 6 years. The guests go dead silent. Someone's chopsticks clatter onto a plate. Min-jun looks like he wants to crawl under the table and disappear into the floor. Jin-tae's wife grabs the edge of the table so hard, her knuckles go white. Jin-tae himself is frozen, his face a mask of rage with nowhere to go, because every noble in the room is watching him, and every noble in the room just heard a dead woman describe his crimes in perfect detail. Lord Min sets his cup down very slowly. He doesn't look at Jin-tae. He looks at Jae-min. He asks the boy to repeat his name. Jae-min bows, just enough to show respect without breaking eye contact, and says his name is Hwang Jae-min, firstborn son of this house. He says he was declared dead by the man sitting at the head of that table. He says the man sitting at the head of that table is a murderer and a thief and a traitor to the crown. Jin-tae explodes. He slams both fists on the table and roars that this is a farce and that the dead can be compelled to say anything by a sorcerer. He points at Jae-min with a shaking finger and calls him a necromancer who has sold his soul to dark powers. He demands Lord Min order the royal guards to strike this demon down where he stands. Lord Min doesn't move. He's still watching Jae-min like a man who's been doing politics longer than most of these nobles have been breathing. He asks Jae-min if he has proof beyond the spirit's testimony. Jae-min reaches into his coat and pulls out the stone. It's the anchor stone from his training with Soo-yeon, carved with the bond thread that tethers the servant spirit. And he sets it on the feast table right next to the roast duck. He says this stone holds the spirit's pact. He says anyone who doubts her words can examine the binding and see for themselves that it's been made willingly, without coercion, on the grudge of a murdered soul. A mage from House Song, an old woman with silver hair and a staff made of twisted ironwood, steps forward and studies the stone for a long moment. Her face goes pale. She turns to Lord Min and says, "The binding is clean." She says the spirit is bound by her own will and her own grievance. She says the dead do not lie about the hands that killed them. Lord Min stands up. The room holds its breath. He says that by the authority vested in him as an inspector of the royal court, he is placing Hwang Jae-min under immediate investigation for murder, embezzlement of royal taxes, and conspiracy to defraud the crown. He says Jae-min will be detained in his own estate until a full audit can be conducted. He says if the ledger under the persimmon tree exists and matches the spirit's account, then Jae-min's head is already forfeit. Jae-min's wife screams something about this being an outrage. Min-jun starts crying, actual tears running down his face, his injured arm still limp at his side. Jae-min says nothing at all. He stands there with his fists on the table and his face turning dark red and his eyes burning with something that isn't just fury. It's fear. Lord Min turns to Jae-min and says the boy has done the crown a service tonight. He says he'll need Jae-min to remain at the estate as a material witness. He says there will be questions, paperwork, a full hearing before the magistrate. Jae-min nods and says he isn't going anywhere. And then Jae-min starts laughing. It's not a sane laugh. It's low and wet and wrong, the kind of sound that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. He reaches into his robes and pulls out something small and black and glistening. It looks like a shard of obsidian. It pulses. The old mage from House Song takes one look at it, and her face goes gray, and she screams at everyone to get back. She shouts that it's a demon fragment. She says the Lord has been consorting with abyssal forces. Jae-min crushes the shard in his fist. Black smoke pours out between his fingers. It coils up his arm and over his shoulder, and spreads across his chest like veins of ink. His eyes go black. Not dark brown, not bloodshot. Black, full black, sockets full of liquid shadow. And when he opens his mouth, a sound comes out that is not a human voice. It's a chorus, layered and grinding, like a dozen mouths speaking just slightly out of sync. Jae-min's body swells. His robes tear at the seams as his shoulders broaden, and his arms thicken, and his fingers curl into claws. Dark tendrils burst from his back, lashing the air, knocking over candelabras and sending plates crashing to the floor. The guests scream and scramble. Min-jun is dragged away by a servant. Jae-min's wife faints on the spot. Lord Min draws his ceremonial sword, which is mostly for show, but he holds it steady anyway and shouts for the royal guards. Jae-min doesn't wait. He raises his hand, and General Baek is already moving, his massive spectral blade cutting an arc through the smoke-filled air. The warlord slams into the transformed Jae-min with enough force to crack the stone floor beneath them, and for a second it looks like it's enough. General Baek's sword bites deep into the demon flesh of Jae-min's shoulder. Black ichor sprays across the silk banners. Then, the demonic aura hits. It pours off Jae-min in waves, thick and choking and wrong, and General Baek staggers. The warlord's spectral form flickers, his edges going translucent, and Jae-min feels it in his chest, like a spike of ice driven straight through his ribs. Baek grits his teeth and holds his ground, but Jae-min can see the demonic energy eating at the spirit's substance, like acid eating through steel. The general is strong, but this thing is poison to spirits. Pure concentrated corruption that was literally made to destroy the kind of bond Jae-min relies on. Baek shouts over his shoulder that the boy needs to pull him back now. Jae-min's hands are shaking. He can feel the packed thread fraying, the soul fragment he bound into Baek starting to burn. And out of nowhere, Soo-yeon is beside him with her sword drawn and her face set hard as stone. She says they need to retreat. She says this is not a fight they can win in a banquet hall with civilians everywhere and a demon fragment that hasn't fully awakened yet. Jae-min forces the words out through gritted teeth and commands General Baek to withdraw. The warlord disengages with a roar of pure frustration, his blade tearing free from Jae-min's shoulder. and he dissolves back into the anchor stone in Jae-min's pocket. The stone is hot to the touch now, almost too hot to hold. Jae-min summons the rest of his spirit squad to form a rear guard, a wall of hollow dead between the guests and the thing that used to be his father. Jin-tae swipes at them with those dark tendrils, and 2 lesser spirits are shredded instantly, their forms dispersing into pale mist. Jae-min feels each loss like a small stitch popping inside his soul. But the anchors hold, and he stays on his feet. Soo-yeon grabs his arm and pulls him toward the side door. Lord Min is already organizing the evacuation, his guards forming a protective line around the guests. The old mage from House Song conjuring a barrier of blue light to slow the demon's advance. Jiho's body is still mutating, the black veins spreading, the claws lengthening, that awful chorus voice laughing and laughing. The last thing Jae-min sees before Soo-yeon drags him out the door is his father's face splitting into a grin that has too many teeth. They don't stop running until they're deep in the forest, half a league from the estate, with the night cold on their faces and the distant glow of the manor's lanterns swallowed by the trees. Jae-min collapses against a fallen log. The anchor stone in his pocket is still burning hot. He pulls it out and sees cracks running through it, thin hairline fractures spreading from the center. General Beck's voice comes from inside the stone, weak and staticky, saying the demon fragment was older than he expected. He says it's not a shard. It's a seed. He says if it fully blooms inside Jin-tae's body, the thing that emerges won't be human anymore, and it won't be stoppable by conventional means. Soo-yeon sheathes her sword and crouches beside Jae-min and asks if the general is going to recover. Beck's voice says he'll mend, but it'll take time. He says he needs to rest inside the stone. Then he goes quiet. Jae-min sits there in the dark, sweaty and exhausted, and down 2 spirits and 1 nearly cracked anchor stone. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, he looks genuinely lost. Soo-yeon doesn't offer comfort. She just says there's someone they need to see. She says up in the mountains, about a day's hard ride from here, lives a man named Seo-jin. She says he's an exorcist, a real one, not a temple fraud. She says if anyone in this kingdom knows how to seal a demon fragment, it's him. They ride through the night and into the next day, following a winding trail up into the peaks where the air gets thin and the trees turn gnarled and ancient. The path ends at a small hermitage built into the cliffside, barely more than a wooden platform and a roof of woven branches. An old man is sitting cross-legged on the platform, sipping tea from a cracked cup. He has a long white beard and a face like weathered leather, and eyes that are perfectly calm. The kind of calm that only comes from having seen absolutely everything and stopped being surprised decades ago. He looks up as Jae-min and Soo-yeon approach and says he was wondering when they'd show up. He says the mountain spirits have been chattering about the disturbance at the Hwang estate for hours. He asks if the boy brought the cracked anchor stone with him. Jae-min hands it over. Master Seo turns it over in his fingers, humming softly, and then nods. He says it's a demon seed, all right. He says the fragment Jin-tae crushed was a piece of a greater demon, planted inside a mortal vessel to incubate. And once it fully matures, it will consume the host and open a gate for its original form to enter the world. He says they have maybe a week before that happens. He says less if Jin-tae keeps feeding it with his own rage and fear. Jae-min asks if there's a way to stop it. Master Seo takes a long sip of tea. He says there's a talisman, an old one, sealed away by the exorcists of the previous dynasty in a place that was meant to be forgotten. He says the talisman acts as a containment vessel, a spiritual cage that can trap the demon fragment and sever its connection to the host without killing the host. He says Jin-tae might even survive the extraction. He says the talisman is located in a mine about 2 days east of here. Jae-min asks what's in the mine. Master Seo's calm eyes flicker with something that might be sympathy. He says the mine is haunted. He says the exorcists who sealed the talisman didn't want anyone digging it up, so they bound guardian spirits to the tunnels. And over the centuries, those guardians have gone mad, their bonds twisted by time and darkness. He says they'll attack anything that enters, living or dead. He says the only reason Jae-min might have a chance is because the boy doesn't walk with the living or the dead anymore. He walks in the space between. Jae-min looks at Soo-yeon. The spy's face is unreadable, but he's learned to read her tiny tells by now. She doesn't like this. She doesn't try to stop him, though. She says if he's going into a haunted mine, she's coming with him. She says someone needs to make sure he doesn't bleed out in the dark. Master Seo presses his palm against the cracked anchor stone and mutters a few words under his breath. The hairline fractures seal themselves, not gone but stabilized, held together by a thin layer of golden light. He hands it back and says, "That'll hold for a few days." He says the general inside will need proper mending later, but for now the boy's strongest spirit won't shatter on him. Jae-min slips the stone back into his pocket. He asks where exactly this mine is. Master Seo draws a rough map in the dirt with a stick, marking a valley 2 days east, where the old mining road splits at a dead pine struck by lightning. He says the mine entrance is hidden behind a waterfall, sealed with iron gates that haven't been opened in 300 years. He says the talisman sits in the deepest chamber, inside a stone box carved with the exorcist's seal, protected by more than just mad ghosts. Soo-yeon asks what else is in there. The old man sips his tea and says the exorcists bound something in that box alongside the talisman, something they couldn't kill, something that's been waiting in the dark ever since. He doesn't elaborate. Jae-min asks if he has any advice for getting past the Guardians. Master Seo says the Guardians are bound spirits who forgot their original purpose, driven insane by centuries of isolation. But they still remember one thing. They remember what it feels like to be trapped. He says if Jae-min can make them remember that they were once human, some of them might hesitate, and hesitation is all a necromancer needs. Jae-min nods and stands up. They leave the hermitage before dawn, riding east through terrain that gets rougher by the hour, the horses struggling on loose shale and narrow ridges. Soo-yeon doesn't talk much, but she keeps her hand on her sword the whole way, her eyes scanning the tree line like she expects trouble. She's right to be wary. By midday on the second day, they spot the dead pine, a blackened skeleton of a tree split clean down the middle, exactly where the map said it would be. A narrow path veers off the main trail, choked with thorn bushes and fallen rock, and the sound of rushing water grows louder the deeper they go. They dismount and tie the horses and push through the brush on foot, and then the waterfall comes into view. It's not huge, maybe 20 feet high, but the water hits the rocks below with enough force to fill the air with mist, and behind it, Jae-min can just barely make out the dark outline of rusted iron bars. The old gate is half collapsed, one door hanging crooked on its hinges, the other lying flat on the wet stone floor inside. Jae-min summons 4 ghosts, 3 vengeful soldiers, and a captain named Lee who died in the estate dungeon 30 years ago. A quiet spirit with sharp eyes and absolutely no sense of fear. Lee floats ahead into the tunnel and reports back after a few seconds. The entrance is clear, but something is breathing deeper in, something that doesn't sound human. Soo-yeon draws her sword. Jae-min tells her to stay behind him and step only where his ghosts step. They enter the mine. The darkness inside is the thick kind, the kind that swallows torchlight and turns every shadow into a threat. And the air smells like wet copper and rotting wood and something else, something old and sour. The tunnel slopes downward for maybe 50 yards before opening into a wider chamber, and that's where the first guardian hits them. It comes out of the wall, a twisted specter shaped like a miner who's been crushed and stretched and put back together wrong. Its limbs too long, and its mouth too wide, and its eyes glowing a sick yellow in the dark. Lee intercepts it before it reaches Jae-min, spectral blade meeting spectral claws, and the sound that fills the chamber is like metal screaming. The other 3 ghosts fan out, forming a loose perimeter, and Jae-min reaches for the anchor stone in his pocket, feeling General Beck stir restlessly inside, still too weak to fight, but alert and watching. The Guardian shrieks and lunges again, and Lee drives his blade through its chest. But the thing doesn't die, just twists and reforms, and comes back angrier. Soo-yeon says there's got to be a way to put it down for good. Jae-min remembers what Master Seo said, and instead of attacking, he steps forward and speaks to the Guardian directly. He asks it what its name was. The specter freezes mid-lunge, its twisted face twitching, and for a split second, the yellow eyes flicker into something human and scared. Jae-min tells it he can feel the chains the exorcists used, the binding that's been wrapped around its soul for 300 years, keeping it trapped in this mine with no rest and no release. He says he can break those chains. The Guardian makes a sound that might be a sob. Then it dissolves, its form unraveling into pale smoke that drifts back into the wall, and the chamber goes quiet. Soo-yeon stares at him and asks if he actually meant that, the part about breaking the chains. Jae-min says he'll come back for them after the talisman, but right now they don't have time. They press deeper. The mine twists into a labyrinth of branching tunnels, each one looking identical to the last, and the ghosts spread out to scout, their voices echoing back through the stone like distant whispers. Guardian attacks come in waves now, not one at a time, but 3, 4, a swarm of twisted spirits pouring out of the walls and ceiling and floor, their shrieks overlapping into a single, horrible chorus. Jae-min's ghosts fight back hard, but the Guardians are relentless, their forms regenerating faster than his soldiers can cut them down. One of the vengeful soldiers gets grabbed by 6 Guardians at once and torn apart before Jae-min can pull him back, the spirit's essence shredding into nothing. Jae-min stumbles, feeling the loss like a punch to the ribs, his soul light flickering as the pact severs. Lee shouts something, but Jae-min can't hear it over the ringing in his ears. He forces himself to stay upright and speaks to the swarm, the same words he used on the first Guardian, asking them to remember who they were. Some of the spirits hesitate, their yellow eyes dimming, their twisted forms softening at the edges. But one doesn't. The biggest Guardian, a hulking thing with arms like rusted chains and a face that's been worn smooth by time, roars and charges straight through the others, smashing aside both Guardian and Ghost alike. Lee moves to intercept. The chain-armed Guardian swats him out of the air. Lee slams into the tunnel wall, and his spectral form flickers, a crack splitting through his chest like lightning frozen in glass. Jae-min screams the spirit's name. Lee looks at him, the crack spreading wider, and says something Jae-min can't hear, and then his form shatters into 100 fragments of cold light that fade before they hit the ground. Vengeful Lee is gone. The chain-armed Guardian roars in triumph and turns on Jae-min, its rusted arms swinging down like executioner's blades. Soo-yeon steps in front of him and catches one of the arms on her sword, but the impact sends her skidding backward into a support beam, the old wood groaning under the force. Jae-min doesn't have time to think. He reaches for the anchor stone and pours every drop of his remaining strength into General Beck. The stone burns white-hot in his hand, and Beck's voice roars through his skull. And then the general materializes in front of him, still wounded and flickering, but big enough to fill the entire tunnel. The chain-armed Guardian swings, and Beck catches the blow on his spectral blade and holds it there, grinding metal on metal. Sparks of necromantic energy spraying across the stone walls. Beck drives the Guardian back and splits it in half with one clean stroke, and the two halves dissolve before they hit the ground. The tunnel goes silent. Beck turns to Jae-min, his form already flickering, and says that was the last of his strength for now, and asks the boy not to call him again unless the situation is genuinely hopeless. Then he vanishes back into the stone. Jae-min slides down the wall and sits in the dark, breathing hard, his hand pressed against his chest where Lee's pact used to be. He doesn't cry. He just sits there for a long minute, staring at the spot where Lee shattered, his jaw tight and his fists clenched. Soo-yeon kneels beside him and says nothing, because there's nothing to say. Finally, Jae-min pushes himself up and tells the 2 remaining ghosts to keep scouting, and they continue deeper into the mine. They don't talk about Lee. The remaining Guardians keep their distance now, maybe scared off by what Beck did, or maybe something else is making them nervous. Because the deeper they go, the quieter the mine gets. The copper smell fades, and the rotting wood smell fades, and what's left is just the sour old thing they noticed at the entrance, stronger now, thick enough to taste. The tunnel dead ends at a stone door carved with the exorcist's seal, the same symbol Master Seo drew in the dirt. A circle inside a triangle, inside a square, with lines of ancient script radiating outward like sunbeams. The door isn't locked. It swings open with a touch, silent and smooth, despite 3 centuries of rust and dust. And beyond it is a circular chamber lit by something that isn't torchlight, a cold blue glow that seems to come from the walls themselves. In the center of the chamber sits a stone box. It's about the size of a human torso, carved from black stone that drinks the blue light, the exorcist's seal repeated on every surface. And Jae-min can feel the talisman pulsing inside it like a heartbeat. But he can also feel the thing Master Seo warned him about, the thing the exorcists couldn't kill. It's inside the box with the talisman, and it's awake. Soo-yeon draws her sword and asks if he has a plan. Jae-min approaches the box and places both hands on the lid, and the cold that shoots up his arms is so intense it burns, and his vision goes white. And suddenly, he's not in the chamber anymore. He's standing in a vast, empty darkness, and something is standing in front of him. Something old and patient and utterly silent. Its shape too large to take in and too dark to look at directly. It asks him a question, not with words, but with a feeling, a pressure against his mind that translates into meaning. What is he willing to give for the thing inside the box? Jae-min says nothing. The darkness presses harder, showing him images now, flashes of everything he's already lost, every ghost that's been destroyed, every wound he's taken, every moment he's nearly died. It asks again, what is he willing to give? Jae-min thinks of Lee shattering against the tunnel wall. He thinks of his father's face warped by demonic energy. He thinks of the estate he swore to take back and the family he swore to destroy. He tells the darkness he's already given everything he has and doesn't have anything left to offer. The darkness considers this. Then it releases him. His vision clears, and he's back in the chamber, his hands still on the box, the cold fading to a dull ache, and the lid cracks open on its own. Inside is the talisman. It's a strip of yellowed paper about the length of his forearm, covered in red ink that still looks wet after 3 centuries. And it hums with an energy that makes his teeth ache and his bones vibrate. He lifts it out carefully and wraps it in the cloth Master Seo gave him, and the moment it's covered, the humming stops. The thing inside the box with it, whatever it was, doesn't emerge. The box seals itself shut again, the lid fusing back into place like it was never opened. And Jae-min puts the wrapped talisman into his coat and says they're leaving. They retrace their steps through the labyrinth, the remaining guardians parting silently to let them pass. Their yellow eyes tracking Jae-min, but their bodies staying still. When they reach the collapsed gate and step back out into the daylight, Jae-min nearly falls over. The ride back is a blur of exhaustion and cold, and Soo-yeon's voice telling him to stay awake. Stay awake. Don't you dare fall off this horse. Master Seo is waiting for them at the hermitage, and when Jae-min hands him the wrapped talisman, the old man's calm eyes finally show something other than serenity. It looks like fear. He unwraps the talisman and studies the red ink for a long moment, and then he says it's intact and functional, and they're very lucky the darkness in the box chose to let them leave. Jae-min asks what that thing was. Master Seo says he doesn't know and doesn't want to know, and he suggests the boy never go back to that mine for any reason whatsoever. Then he places the talisman into a wooden scroll case and seals it with a strip of blessed paper and hands it back, saying the boy now has everything he needs to stop Jin-tae. But before Jae-min can respond, one of his remaining ghost scouts materializes beside him, its spectral form flickering with urgency. The scout reports that a force is moving toward the estate, a big force. Jin-tae has rallied every remaining guard, every mercenary he could hire, and every soldier House Kwon could spare, and they're marching under a new banner, a black flag Jae-min doesn't recognize. Master Seo's face goes pale, and he says that's not a House Kwon banner. He says that's the sigil of the Black Lotus sect. The cult has stopped hiding. Jae-min realizes his father isn't just desperate anymore. Jin-tae has handed the estate over to the cult completely, and the army marching under that black flag isn't an army of soldiers. It's an army of fanatics, cultists who've been feeding on demonic energy for years, and they're coming to wipe Jae-min off the map before he can use the talisman. The scout says the army is maybe 3 days out, 4 if the mountain passes slow them down. Soo-yeon mounts her horse and says they need to move now. She says there's an old watchtower about half a day's ride west, a military outpost from the border wars that's been abandoned for decades, with walls thick enough to hold against a siege. Jae-min asks what good a watchtower is against an army. Soo-yeon says it's not about winning. She says they just need to hold long enough for the talisman to work, and for that, they need a defensible position and every ghost he can summon between now and when that army arrives. Jae-min looks at Master Seo and asks if the talisman will work on Jin-tae if the cult is protecting him. Master Seo says the talisman only needs physical contact with the host, so Jae-min just has to get close enough to slap it onto Jin-tae's body. He says getting close enough will be the hard part. Jae-min pockets the scroll case and climbs onto his horse and tells Soo-yeon to show him this watchtower. They ride west, and behind them, the mountain wind carries the faint sound of drums, the steady marching beat of an army that has no intention of losing. The watchtower is exactly what Soo-yeon promised: thick stone walls, an iron gate that still works, and a commanding view of the valley below. It's also half collapsed on the eastern side and full of 3 decades of bird droppings. But our boy doesn't have time to be picky. He rides through the gate and starts issuing orders before his horse even stops moving. Every ghost he's got left fans out along the walls, taking up positions in the arrow slits and the broken battlements. General Beck materializes in the gatehouse, his spectral armor gleaming even in the fading light, and surveys the terrain with the cold eye of a man who's defended worse positions. He tells Jae-min the walls will hold against infantry, but the eastern breach is a problem. Jae-min tells him to station the Vengeful captains there and make it a kill zone. Soo-yeon is already off her horse and dragging supplies into the tower's lower chamber. She pulls out oil flasks, rope, a handful of signal flares, and a blade she sharpens without looking at it while she talks. She says the cult army is moving faster than expected, and they might be here by nightfall tomorrow instead of 3 days. Jae-min asks how she knows that. She taps her ear and says she's been listening to the drums change tempo, and she knows a forced march when she hears one. Our boy climbs to the top of the tower and looks out across the valley. The sun is setting, and the shadows are long, and the distant drumbeat is a low, constant rumble under the wind. He can't see the army yet, but he can feel it. The ghosts feel it too, their forms flickering with a restlessness that isn't fear, but anticipation. These spirits were murdered, betrayed, and forgotten. Now something dark is marching toward them, and they want to meet it. Jae-min spends the next 6 hours fortifying. He has his ghosts drag fallen stone into the eastern breach, building a rough barricade that won't stop a determined charge, but will funnel attackers exactly where he wants them. Soo-yeon rigs tripwires across the approach and sets oil traps at the base of the slope. She works fast and silent, and doesn't waste a single movement. When Jae-min asks where she learned to prepare a killing ground, she doesn't answer. He doesn't ask again. By midnight, the watchtower looks less like an abandoned ruin and more like a very unfriendly place to attack. Jae-min sits against the inner wall and closes his eyes and reaches out to every spirit under his command. He's got fewer than 30 ghosts left. The cult army has hundreds. The math isn't good. But he's not here to win. He's here to hold. He opens his eyes and pulls the scroll case from his coat and checks the talisman inside. Still intact, still humming with that weird vibration that makes his back teeth ache. Master Seo said he just needs to get close enough to slap this onto Jin-tae's body. Close enough, through an army of demon-fed fanatics. No big deal. Dawn breaks gray and cold, and the drumbeat is much closer now. Jae-min stands at the top of the tower and watches the black banner appear on the horizon. The cult army comes out of the mountain pass like a slow black tide. Hundreds of figures in dark robes, their faces hidden behind masks carved to look like screaming spirits. They move in perfect silence except for the drums. No war cries, no shouted orders. Just the steady beat and the shuffle of hundreds of feet. Soo-yeon joins him at the battlement and studies the formation for a long moment. She says they're not deploying like an army. She says they're moving like a single body, and that means they're probably being controlled by one will. Jae-min asks if she means Hyo Ha-jun. She says it could be the cult leader himself, or it could be something speaking through him, and neither option is good. The cult army stops at the base of the slope, 100 yards from the watchtower walls. The drums fall silent. A single figure steps forward from the front rank, taller than the others, his mask painted gold instead of white. He raises one hand, and the air around him ripples with heat, and something dark flickers behind his eyes. Jae-min recognizes the energy. It's the same demonic aura that pours off his father. The gold-masked guy doesn't speak, and doesn't negotiate, and doesn't offer terms. He just drops his hand, and the cultists start climbing the slope all at once, moving in perfect unison like a single black wave. Our boy doesn't wait. He throws a hand forward, and General Beck roars, and the ghost army surges over the walls to meet them. The first cultists hit the barricade, and Beck's spectral blade cleaves through 3 of them at once. Their bodies drop, but no blood spills, just black smoke that hisses out of the wounds and coils upward like living things. Jae-min watches from the tower and directs his ghosts with short commands, redirecting a vengeful captain to the left flank where the cultists are trying to scale the wall. Soo-yeon lights an oil flask and hurls it into the breach, and the slope erupts in flame. Cultists keep climbing through the fire, their robes burning, their bodies not slowing down. Our boy's stomach tightens. These aren't soldiers. Soldiers feel pain and fear and self-preservation. These things don't. The first cultist reaches the top of the wall, and Jae-min meets him with a blade through the throat, yanking it out before the body hits the stone. 2 more take his place, then 5, then 10. General Beck is holding the breach almost single-handedly, his massive form a wall of spectral fury. But even he is being pushed back inch by inch. Jae-min fights and directs and doesn't stop moving, his blade working and his mind racing through options. The cultists keep coming. They're going to overrun the walls. He's going to lose the Watchtower before noon. Then one of his ghost scouts appears beside him with a report that makes no sense. A second force is approaching from the east, mounted, armed, moving fast. Not cultists. Jae-min risks a glance eastward and sees a column of riders coming down from the high pass, maybe 40 of them, and at their head is a banner he recognizes. House Kwon. Kwon Do-yoon has come to finish what he started. Our boy's situation just went from bad to genuinely catastrophic. He's got cultists pouring over his walls, and a rival noble riding hard to hit his flank, and he's running out of ghosts and time and options. So he does the one thing nobody expects. He vaults the battlement and lands on the slope outside the walls, and starts walking toward the approaching riders. General Beck shouts something he doesn't hear. The cultists hesitate for one confused second. Jae-min keeps walking, his blade out but lowered, his heart hammering but his face completely calm. Kwon Do-yoon pulls his horse to a stop 20 yards away and stares down at our boy like he's looking at a ghost, which, considering the circumstances, is pretty funny. Do-yoon demands to know what he's doing. Jae-min says he's offering the man a chance to save his house's honor. Do-yoon laughs and says there is no honor in dealing with an outlaw. Jae-min points at the cultists climbing over his walls and says that thing wearing his father's face is the real outlaw. And if Do-yoon helps him stop it, the capital will hear a very different story about House Kwon's involvement. Do-yoon's eyes narrow. He's not stupid. He knows the cult is a political cancer, and being tied to them is a death sentence for any noble house. Jae-min can see him calculating the angles, weighing the risk of betrayal against the risk of being exposed as a cult collaborator. Then Do-yoon dismounts and draws his blade and says he'll hear the boy's proposal, but if it's a trick, he'll take his head personally. Jae-min says it's no trick. He needs the House Kwon riders to hold the eastern flank while his ghosts prosecute the breach. If they do that, the Watchtower holds until dark. If the Watchtower holds until dark, he can force his father to meet him in single combat. Do-yoon asks why he'd want single combat with a demon-possessed monster. Jae-min holds up the sealed scroll case and says, because he's got a way to put the monster back in its cage, and all he needs is one clean touch. Do-yoon stares at him for a long moment. Then he nods and shouts orders to his men, and the House Kwon riders wheel east and charge straight into the cultist flank. The impact is brutal. Horses hit the cultist formation at full gallop, and bodies go flying, and the black wave finally breaks. General Beck sees the opening and rallies, his blade cutting a path through the chaos. Jae-min climbs back up to the Watchtower, and Soo-yeon gives him a look that says she really wishes he'd stop doing insane things without warning her first. He tells her it worked. She says it almost didn't. Together they push the cultists back down the slope, Beck and the House Kwon riders hammering them from both sides. The gold-masked guy tries to rally his forces, but the momentum is gone, and his perfect control is slipping. By the time the sun is directly overhead, the cult army has pulled back to the tree line, leaving dozens of their dead smoking on the slope. Jae-min stands in the gatehouse and tries not to collapse. Every muscle hurts, and his vision keeps blurring at the edges, and he can feel the soul drain gnawing at the back of his mind. But the watchtower is still standing, and now he's got 40 House Kwon riders inside the walls, and a very nervous Kwon Do-yoon standing 3 feet away from him trying not to look at General Baek. The guy is clearly rethinking every life choice that led him to this moment. Jae-min doesn't blame him. Our boy tells Do-yoon he's going to honor their deal. If House Kwon helps him reach his father, the capital hears that Kwon Do-yoon broke with the cult and fought to defend the kingdom. Do-yoon asks what happens if Jae-min fails and the demon wins. Jae-min says in that case they're all dead anyway, so it won't matter. Do-yoon doesn't seem comforted by this. The cult army stays at the tree line for the rest of the day, regrouping, waiting for something. Jae-min uses the time to rest and redistribute his ghosts and check the talisman for the 10th time. Still intact, still humming, still the only thing standing between a demon and everything it wants. As dusk falls, a lone rider comes out of the tree line under a white flag. Jae-min recognizes the figure even before he can see the face. It's his half-brother. Min-jun rides up to the gate looking like he hasn't slept in a week, his face pale and his eyes too wide and a tremor in his hands. He says he's been sent as a messenger. He says their father wants to parley. Jae-min laughs and says their father isn't in charge anymore. Min-jun flinches and says he knows, and that's why he's really here. He says the thing wearing their father's face is planning something, a ritual at midnight, something that will make the demon stronger. He says he doesn't want to be part of it anymore. He says he's sorry. Our boy looks at his half-brother, the same kid who laughed when he was dragged away in chains, the same coward who let their father turn the estate into a cult stronghold, and he feels nothing. No rage, no pity, just a cold clarity. He tells Min-jun he can prove his loyalty by telling him exactly where the ritual is being set up and exactly how many guards are on it. Min-jun spills everything. The ritual is in the main courtyard of the estate, under a black canopy, with 12 cult priests and a circle of blood. The demon needs a sacrifice, and it has chosen one of the captured servants. Min-jun says the ritual starts at midnight, and once it's complete, the demon will be too strong for the talisman to work. Jae-min asks how his father looked the last time Min-jun saw him. Min-jun's eyes go wet, and he says there's nothing left of their father in there. Just the demon, just the hunger. Jae-min tells him to go back to the estate and stay out of the way. And if he tries to warn anyone about what he just told him, he'll feed him to General Baek piece by piece. Min-jun turns his horse and rides away so fast he nearly falls out of the saddle. Guess what happens next? Our boy doesn't wait for dawn. He doesn't wait for the cultists to finish regrouping. He gathers Do-yoon and Soo-yoon and General Baek and lays out the plan in 6 sentences. They're going to hit the estate tonight, before midnight, before the ritual, and Jae-min is going to walk straight through whatever defenses the cult has left, and he's going to find his father, and he's going to end this. Soo-yeon says the plan is insane and will probably get them all killed. General Baek just grins, his spectral teeth gleaming in the torchlight. He says he's been dead for 3 centuries, and he's never had this much fun. Do-yoon looks like he wants to object, but one glance at General Baek changes his mind. The force moves out an hour after full dark. Jae-min rides at the head with the talisman case strapped to his chest, and every ghost he has left spread out around him like a cold wind. 40 House Kwon riders behind him, 1 royal agent at his side, 1 ancient warlord spirit waiting to be summoned, and a whole lot of cultists between him and a demon wearing his father's face. The estate lights appear through the trees around midnight, and Jae-min can already see the black glow of the ritual starting to rise above the walls. He's got maybe half an hour before the sacrifice is complete and the demon becomes unkillable. He kicks his horse into a gallop and doesn't look back. The cultists at the gate see him coming and raise the alarm, but it's too late. General Baek hits the gate like a battering ram, and the iron bars explode inward, and then our boy is through and into the courtyard, and the ritual is right there in front of him. 12 priests in a circle, black energy coiling between them, a servant bound to an altar in the center, and standing over the altar with a blade raised is Hwang Jae-min. Except it isn't Jae-min anymore. His skin is gray and cracking, his eyes are pits of black flame, and when he turns to look at Jae-min, his mouth splits into a smile that has too many teeth. The demon says it was wondering when the boy would arrive. Jae-min dismounts and walks into the ritual circle, and the priests don't stop him. They're too focused on maintaining the spell. The demon lowers the sacrificial blade and tilts its head and asks if Jae-min really thinks he can stop it with a piece of paper. Jae-min pulls the talisman from the case and holds it up so the red ink catches the black firelight and says one word. Yes. The demon laughs, and the sound shakes the stones under their feet. Then it lunges. The thing wearing his father's face lunges. The talisman is still in Jae-min's hand, and he doesn't even blink. He slaps the red-inked paper straight onto the demon's chest. For half a heartbeat, the black fire dims, and the priests gasp. Then the demon laughs even harder, and its skin starts to split. Cracks run up Jintae's arms like dry riverbeds, and black light pours out of them. The gray flesh tears away in sheets, and underneath it is something with no business being in a human body. Bone plates push through the shoulders and lock together like armor. A row of spines erupts down the demon's back, and each one drips with something that isn't blood. Its jaw unhinges, and the mouth stretches too wide and too full of needle teeth. The eyes go from black pits to burning violet slits. This isn't Jintae anymore. It hasn't been Jintae for a long time, but now there isn't even a mask left. The demon fully takes the wheel, and its first act is to backhand Jae-min clean across the courtyard. Our boy hits a stone pillar, and the impact leaves a crater. Soo-yeon shouts his name and looses an arrow straight into the thing's neck. The arrowhead glows with some kind of purification charm, but it shatters against the bone plate like glass. The demon doesn't even look at her. It raises one clawed hand, and the black canopy above the altar tears itself apart, and the ritual circle under everyone's feet flares with violet light. The 12 priests drop to their knees and start chanting faster, their voices shaking. Do-yoon's riders try to push forward, but the demon flicks its wrist, and a wave of force sends 6 of them flying. The bound servant screams, and the altar stone cracks down the middle. Jae-min pulls himself out of the pillar rubble with blood running from his temple. His eyes go straight to the talisman still glued to the demon's chest. The red ink is burning away line by line, and the demon isn't even trying to peel it off. It's letting the seal fail on purpose just to prove a point. Guess what happens next? A cold wind cuts through the courtyard, and the demon's violet eyes swivel toward it, and a voice that is definitely not Jae-min's says one word. Boy. General Baek stands in the center of the courtyard. His spectral armor gleams like cracked moonlight, and his ghost blade is already drawn, and the old warlord is smiling. The demon's smile gets even wider, and it asks if the dead man wants to die twice. Baek doesn't answer. He turns his head just enough to look at Jae-min, and his voice drops to something almost gentle. The seal needs an anchor, young lord. Something with weight. Jae-min's eyes go wide because he knows exactly what the old warlord is saying. He shakes his head, but Baek is already turning back to the demon. 3 centuries in the dirt. I was waiting for a fight that mattered. Baek raises his blade, and the air pressure in the courtyard doubles. This is it. The demon lunges again, and Baek meets it head-on. Steel and claw collide, and the shockwave shatters windows all along the main hall. Baek's ghost blade leaves a silver arc through the demon's shoulder, and black ichor sprays across the stones. The demon roars and drives a claw through Baek's spectral chest, but the old warlord doesn't even slow down. He grabs the demon's wrist with his free hand and yanks it forward and drives his forehead into its face. The bone plate cracks. The priests stagger, and 2 of them collapse with blood running from their ears. Jae-min pushes off the pillar and starts to move, but Baek barks at him to stay back. This isn't your fight anymore, boy. I'm the only one heavy enough to anchor a thing like this. He drives the demon back step by step, every blow leaving silver lines in the air that don't fade. Then Baek throws his blade aside. It sticks in the ground 20 feet away, and the demon's violet eyes flicker with the first hint of confusion. Baek opens his arms wide, and the spectral armor starts to unravel, and every thread of it burns gold white. The ritual circle shudders, and the demon realizes what's happening and tries to pull away, but it's too late. Baek wraps his dissolving arms around the monster, and the talisman on its chest ignites with new light. I lived a warlord, I die a spear. The gold-white threads lash outward and pierce the demon's torso and pin it to the ground, and the black fire screams. Baek's form is almost gone now, just a silhouette of light holding the demon in place. His voice comes one last time, quiet and proud. Give the bastards hell, boy. And then General Beck is gone. The demon shrieks and thrashes, but the gold-white chains hold. The talisman burns itself into the creature's chest, and the violet light in its eyes flickers and dims, and then the whole courtyard goes silent. Jintae's body crumples to the stones. The demon is sealed. It isn't dead. The dark energy is still coiled under the skin like a snake in a bottle, but it isn't moving anymore. Jintae's chest rises and falls in shallow breaths. Comatose. Empty. The priests around the altar drop one after another, drained by the backlash, their black robes pooling around them like dead insects. Do-yoon's riders are picking themselves up, and Soo-yeon has her bow aimed at the collapsed cultists, and no one speaks. Then the laughter starts. It doesn't come from Jintae's mouth. It echoes off the walls and the stones, a low, rolling sound that's way too amused for a thing that just got sealed. The demon's voice slithers through the courtyard like oil. Temporary, little necromancer. Every chain breaks. Jae-min stands over his father's body and looks down at the talisman embedded in the chest. The ink is solid again, but the edges are already starting to smoke. So the old warlord bought them time. Not forever, but enough. Jae-min closes his eyes for exactly 2 seconds, and when he opens them, the kid who used to be afraid of his father is gone. There's just a guy with a deadline and a ghost army and absolutely nothing left to lose. Morning comes gray and cold. The estate is a wreck, and the servants who survived the ritual are huddled in the kitchens, and nobody's really in charge anymore. That's when the royal messenger rides through the gate. He's wearing the king's colors, and he's got an escort of 6 palace guards, and they all look like they'd rather be anywhere else. The messenger unrolls a scroll with the royal seal stamped on it and clears his throat. Lord Min's report reached the capital. The king has questions. Hwang Jae-min is hereby summoned to appear before the throne in 3 days' time. Failure to appear means charges of treason. Soo-yeon snorts and says that's just how the palace works. They can't decide if he's a hero or a criminal, so they'll make him stand in a room and find out. Jae-min takes the scroll and doesn't bow, and the messenger looks like he wants to say something about protocol, but he takes one look at the scorch marks on the courtyard stones and decides against it. Do-yoon volunteers to stay behind and keep the estate from turning into a cult feeding ground again. Jae-min is left with Soo-yeon, 6 remaining vengeful spirits, and a 3-day ride to the capital. No Beck, no backup, just a talisman that's already starting to fray at the edges. They ride out before noon. The forest road is quiet, and Soo-yeon keeps her hand on her bow the whole way. Jae-min's ghost scouts range ahead like cold mist between the trees. 5 miles from the estate, they stop. Jae-min's eyes glaze for a second, the way they do when a spirit reports back. He pulls his horse up short. Soo-yeon asks what's wrong. Our boy's voice is flat. 12 bodies in the tree line ahead. Breathing, not dead. Armed. Soo-yeon's eyes narrow, and she slides an arrow out of her quiver. The ghosts give him shapes now. Black robes, curved blades. A familiar lotus emblem stitched over the heart. Black Lotus Sect, Hyo Ha-jun's pets. They've got the road flanked, and they've got a mage in the center doing something with a red crystal. Soo-yeon curses under her breath and says the cult must have gotten word of the summons. They want Jae-min dead before he ever reaches the capital. Jae-min lets out a slow breath and reaches for the packed bonds that still hum in his chest. 6 vengeful spirits answer. No warlord, no cavalry, just a royal agent, a handful of angry ghosts, and a guy who just watched his best ally burn himself out to buy a few days. He looks at Soo-yeon and asks if she's got any tricks left. She grins, all teeth and 0 fear. 1 or 2. Our boy turns back toward the tree line, and the cold wind starts to gather around him. The Black Lotus ambush is set and waiting. He kicks his horse forward. 12 assassins, 6 ghosts, 1 royal agent, and absolutely no intention of stopping now. The Black Lotus assassins spring from the tree line like a dozen shadows with knives. Soo-yeon's arrow takes the first one through the throat before his feet even hit the road. Our boy doesn't slow his horse. He rides straight into the kill zone and lets the ghosts fly. 2 vengeful spirits slam into the front rank, and the assassin's formation cracks right down the middle. The mage with the red crystal raises it above his head, and the air starts to hum. Soo-yeon shouts that it's a blood tether. The cult's been tracking us since we left the estate. Jae-min sends a spirit crashing into the mage, but the crystal flares, and the ghost bounces off like it hit a wall. The assassin leader whistles 2 sharp notes, and the whole squad shifts to a crescent formation. And guess what? These guys aren't ordinary cult foot soldiers. Every single one of them moves with precision, silent, coordinated, blades angled to herd and cut off escape. Our boy has seen a lot of ambushes in the last few weeks, but this one is different. They aren't trying to overwhelm him. They're trying to box him in. Soo-yeon wheels her horse and fires 2 arrows in the space of a breath. One pins an assassin's sleeve to a tree, and the other shatters the red crystal in the mage's hands. The mage screams as the backlash burns his palms black, and the anti-ghost barrier collapses. Jae-min grins. That's more like it. The vengeful spirits rush in, and the assassins scatter, but the leader doesn't run. He drops into a low stance, and his blade starts glowing with a sickly green light. Demon-touched steel. Soo-yeon's eyes go wide, and she yells that the cult's been smuggling those weapons into the capital for months. Our boy asks how she knows that, and she doesn't answer. The leader lunges, and the demon blade cuts straight through one of Jae-min's spirits like it's made of paper. The ghost shrieks and dissolves, and Jae-min feels the pact bond snap in his chest. That's 2 spirits gone in as many days. The soul toll hits him like a punch to the ribs. He sways in the saddle, and Soo-yeon catches his arm before he topples. She tells him to stay on the horse, and then she does something Jae-min has never seen before. She pulls a silver chain from inside her sleeve and whispers a word he doesn't recognize. The chain glows blue, and the assassins freeze. Every single one of them. Not fear, actual paralysis. Their muscles lock up, and they stand there like statues with their blades half raised. Jae-min stares at her. Soo-yeon shrugs and says she was going to mention it eventually. She's not just a royal agent. She's a palace inquisitor, special division, hunting cult artifacts and demon worshippers for 6 years. Our boy lets out a breath that's half laugh and half disbelief. She could have led with that. She says she wasn't sure he'd trust a stranger with the truth, and he's got to admit that's fair. The silver chain pulses, and Soo-yeon walks to the frozen leader and presses 2 fingers to his forehead. His eyes roll back, and she starts pulling information the old-fashioned way, mind extraction. It takes about 30 seconds, and when she's done, the leader collapses, and she looks pale. She tells Jae-min the cult's plan is way worse than an ambush. The Black Lotus isn't trying to kill him on the road. They're stalling him. While the assassins keep him busy, a full ritual circle is being set up inside the Hwang estate's underground vault. Jae-min's blood goes cold. His father's comatose body is still in that manner. The demon fragment is sealed inside Jin-tae's flesh, and if the cult cracks the seal open, Soo-yeon finishes the thought. They're not summoning a lesser demon. They're trying to pull a greater one through, and they're going to use Jin-tae's body as the door. Jae-min wheels his horse around without a word, and Soo-yeon swings onto hers. The remaining assassins are still frozen, but they won't kill them, no time. Our boy kicks his horse into a dead gallop, and Soo-yeon rides right beside him. The 3-day trip to the capital just became irrelevant. The real fight is back where it started. The forest blurs past, and Jae-min's ghosts range ahead at full speed. He pushes the pact bonds as hard as he dares, and the soul toll starts to ache in his bones. Soo-yeon glances at him and tells him to ease off, or he'll burn out before they even arrive. He doesn't ease off. He pushes harder. They ride through the night, and the horses are foaming by the time the estate gates come into view. The walls are dark, and the guard posts are empty, and the whole place smells like copper and old incense. Jae-min dismounts, and his legs nearly buckle, but he stays upright through sheer stubbornness. Soo-yeon strings her bow, and the silver chain dangles from her wrist. The courtyard is a graveyard. Do-yoon's men are scattered across the stones, unconscious or worse. Do-yoon himself is slumped against the main hall's pillar with a gash across his chest and a broken sword in his hand. He's breathing, but barely. Soo-yeon kneels and presses a cloth to the wound, and his eyes flutter open. He rasps out 3 words. They took him. Jae-min doesn't ask who. He already knows. The cult dragged Jin-tae's body into the vault. Do-yoon says they came an hour after sunset. 24 cultists with a high priest leading them. The high priest had a censer that put half the garrison to sleep before they could draw their swords. Do-yoon fought through the fog long enough to kill 3 of them, but the priest put him down with a word. Our boy's jaw tightens. He tells Do-yoon to hold on, and he'll be back. Do-yoon laughs weakly and says he's not going anywhere. The vault entrance is under the manor's east wing, and Jae-min knows the way. He and Soo-yeon move through the dark corridors, and the ghost scouts sweep ahead. The servants' quarters are empty, and the kitchens are cold, and the estate feels like a corpse wearing its own skin. And then they hear it, a low, rhythmic chanting coming from below the floorboards. The vault door is blown off its hinges, and the stone steps leading down are slick with something dark. Jae-min's ghosts press close, and he can feel their hunger. The spirits know what's waiting down there. Soo-yeon takes point with an arrow notched, and the silver chain glowing on her wrist. The chanting gets louder as they descend, and the air gets thick and warm like summer rot. They reach the bottom, and the vault opens into a massive underground chamber that Jae-min has never seen before. It's older than the estate, maybe older than the kingdom, and the walls are covered in carvings that writhe in the corner of his eye. In the center of the chamber is a ritual circle drawn in what looks like ash and blood. 13 cultists kneel around the perimeter, and the high priest stands at the head with a curved dagger raised. Jin-tae's body lies on a stone slab in the middle of the circle. The talisman on his chest is blackened and cracked, and the demon's violet light pulses beneath the skin. The high priest is chanting in a language that makes Jae-min's ears ache, and the cultists are swaying in unison. Soo-yeon whispers that the ritual is almost complete. When the dagger comes down, the fragment unseals. Jae-min doesn't hesitate. He sends all 6 ghosts into the circle at once. The chamber erupts. Spirits slam into cultists, and the chanting breaks into screams. The high priest spins around, and his eyes are solid black. No whites, no pupils, just pits. He raises the dagger, and the carvings on the walls flare, and a wave of force knocks Jae-min off his feet. Soo-yeon fires an arrow straight at the priest's heart, but it disintegrates before it reaches him. The priest laughs and says the master's coming, and no mortal weapon stops him now. Jae-min pulls himself up and reaches for the pact bonds and pushes everything he has into the ghosts. The spirits grow brighter and sharper, and they tear into the cultists with renewed fury. But the high priest ignores them. He turns back to the slab and brings the dagger down toward Jin-tae's chest. The talisman shatters. The demon fragment screams in delight, and then it jumps. The violet light erupts from Jin-tae's body and arcs through the air like lightning. It slams into the high priest instead. The priest's body convulses, and his mouth opens in a silent howl, and the black pits of his eyes fill with violet fire. Jin-tae's corpse on the slab stays dead. The fragment found a living host. Soo-yeon yanks Jae-min back and says the ritual's gone wrong, the demon's improvising. The high priest's body starts to twist and grow, and the cultists, still alive, scramble away from him. This isn't what they signed up for. They wanted a summoning. They got a possession. Jae-min watches the thing that used to be the high priest rise to its feet, and he feels the cold settle in his stomach. The demon laughs with the priest's mouth, and its voice is the same one from the courtyard. Temporary, little necromancer. It stretches its new fingers, but chains break faster when the host cooperates. Our boy looks at Soo-yeon and asks if she's got any more tricks. She pulls the silver chain taut and says she's got one, but it won't be pretty. The demon lunges, and the chamber fills with violet light, and Jae-min throws his ghosts forward. 6 vengeful spirits hit the creature at once, and it barely slows down. Jae-min's ghosts hit the thing like a wave of broken glass, and they don't even slow it down. The demon swats 2 spirits aside with a backhand, and the third one flickers out entirely. Our boy feels the pact snap, and the recoil hits him like a punch to the ribs. He drops to one knee and gasps, and the demon laughs with the priest's stolen throat. Soo-yeon doesn't wait around for the thing to finish gloating. She whips the silver chain in a wide arc, and it wraps around the creature's forearm, and she yanks hard. The chain flares white-hot, and the demon's skin sizzles where the silver touches it. It hisses and turns toward her, and for the first time, that violet fire in its eyes flickers with something like annoyance. "You carry a warden's chain, little bird. The king must be desperate." Soo-yeon doesn't answer, and she loops the chain around a fallen pillar and pulls the whole thing down on the demon's head. Stone shatters, and dust chokes the chamber, and the creature shrugs it off like rain. It rips the chain off its arm, and the silver burns its palm, but it doesn't care. The thing's already healing faster than the damage can stick. Jae-min drags himself upright and his head swimming, and 3 of his 6 ghosts are gone. The remaining 3 circle him like nervous dogs, and he can feel their fear bleeding through the pact. They've never fought anything that could just delete them. He reaches for the talisman in his belt, and his fingers close around it, and the papers warm against his skin. Master Seo said the talisman was for sealing, not for fighting. But right now, our boy doesn't have a lot of options. The demon takes a step toward Soo-yeon, and the floor cracks under its weight, and the carvings on the walls start bleeding violet light. She backs up and notches another arrow, and this one's got a silver head wrapped in prayer paper. She lets it fly, and it punches through the demon's shoulder, and the thing actually grunts. The wound smokes and doesn't close, and the demon looks down at it with something like curiosity. A blessed arrow. You came prepared. It pulls the arrow out slow, and the shaft's coated in black ichor, and the silver's already corroding. Soo-yeon reaches for another one, but her quiver's empty. She's down to the chain and her short blade, and neither one's going to put this thing in the ground. Jae-min sees the opening, and he doesn't think he just moves. He sends the 3 ghosts in low, and they sweep the demon's legs out from under it. The creature stumbles, and our boy's already sprinting for the stone slab where Jin-tae's body lies. He doesn't know what he's doing, but the seal on the talisman has to connect to something, and the corpse is still the original host. The demon figures out what he's doing before he gets halfway there. It roars, and the sound's not human at all, and a wave of violet force slams Jae-min into the wall. His vision whites out for a second, and he tastes blood, and the talisman nearly slips from his grip. Soo-yeon shouts his name, and he hears the chain snap again, and then something heavy hits the ground. He forces his eyes open, and she's down, and the demon's standing over her with its hand raised. The thing's fingers have turned into claws, and the claws are dripping something black. Meddlesome bird, I'll pluck your feathers one by one. Jae-min doesn't have time to get up, so he does the only thing he can. He throws the talisman. The strip of paper cuts through the air, and it's a stupid, desperate move, and the demon doesn't even bother to dodge. The talisman slaps against its chest and sticks there, and for one heartbeat, nothing happens. Then the paper ignites. The fire's not ordinary flame, and it burns violet and gold at the same time, and the demon screams. It stumbles back from Soo-yeon and claws at its chest, and the talisman sinks into its skin like it's being absorbed. The carvings on the walls dim, and the chanting that's been humming in the background since they entered the chamber finally stops. Every cultist still alive in the room drops to their knees and clutches their heads. The demon's connection to the ritual circle is breaking, and it knows it. It rounds on Jae-min, and the look in those violet eyes is pure murder. You think a scrap of paper saves you? It lunges, and our boy rolls, and the claws gouge a trench in the stone where his head was a second ago. He comes up swinging with a fist wrapped in ghost light, and he catches the thing in the jaw. The punch does almost nothing, but it buys him half a second. He scrambles backward, and the 3 ghosts throw themselves between him and the demon, and it tears through the first one like wet silk. The second pact snaps, and Jae-min's vision doubles. The third ghost, a vengeful captain who died in a grain mill accident 40 years ago, grabs the demon's ankle and holds on. Run, pact bearer! The demon stomps the spirit into nothing, and the last pact breaks, and Jae-min's alone. He's got no ghosts left in the chamber, and his soul feels like a frayed rope about to snap. But he's standing between the demon and the stone slab, and the talisman still burning in the thing's chest. Soo-yeon pulls herself up behind the creature, and her arms hanging wrong, and blood's matting her hair to her scalp. She catches Jae-min's eye, and she doesn't say anything, but he knows that look. She's telling him to finish it. The demon takes a step forward, and its body's starting to smoke from the inside. The talisman's doing something, and the seal isn't stopping the demon, but it's slowing it down. Its movements are jerky now, and the violet fire in its eyes keeps guttering. Even a flawed seal can bind a cracked vessel. Jae-min doesn't know where the words come from. They're just there in his head like someone else put them in. He says them out loud, and the demon freezes. Its face twists, and for a second, Jae-min can see the high priest underneath the monster. The man's real eyes blink through the violet fire, and they're terrified. "Help me!" The demon's mouth says it, but the voice is thin and human, and it's gone before Jae-min can react. The violet fire surges back, and the creature screams, and the priest's face disappears under the demon's mask. The talisman flares one last time, and the demon's chest cracks open, and violet light spills out like burning oil. It stumbles and drops to one knee, and the chamber shakes. Jae-min sees the crack spreading across the demon's torso, and he knows the seal's failing. It bought them a minute, and that minute is up. Soo-yeon drags herself to the fallen pillar, and she pulls something from a hidden pocket in her sleeve. It's a dagger, and the blade's short and curved, and it's got a white sheen that doesn't come from steel. She throws it to Jae-min, and it skids across the stone and stops at his feet. Blessed silver, one use, don't miss. Our boy picks up the dagger, and the handle's warm, and the blade hums against his palm. The demon rises, and the crack in its chest is already knitting shut, and the talisman's burned down to nothing. It laughs, and the sound's wet now, and the violet light's pulsing wild and uncontrolled. You've got nothing left, little necromancer, no ghosts, no seal, no army, just a borrowed knife and a dying woman. Jae-min looks at the demon, and he looks at the slab where his father's corpse lies, and he looks at the dagger in his hand. He thinks about everything that brought him here, and everyone who died along the way, and every pact he made and broke. And he moves. He doesn't charge, and he doesn't scream, and he doesn't try to be a hero. He just walks straight at the thing with the dagger held low, and his eyes on the crack in its chest, where the talisman left a scar. The demon swipes at him, and he ducks under the claws, and the wind from the strike ruffles his hair. It grabs for him with the other hand, and he sidesteps, and the fingers close on empty air. The seal might be broken, but the damage it did is still there, and the demon's slower than it was. Slow enough. Jae-min steps inside its reach, and plants his foot, and drives the dagger up under the ribcage. The blessed silver punches through demon flesh, and the blade sinks to the hilt, and the creature howls. Violet fire erupts from the wound, and Jae-min holds on, and the fire washes over him, and it doesn't burn. The dagger drinks it. The demon's fire pours into the blade, and the silver turns violet, and then white, and then clear, like glass. The creature convulses and tries to pull away, but the dagger's got a grip on something deeper than flesh. It's pulling the demon out of the priest's body and sealing it into the steel. The high priest screams with two voices at once, and his body arches backward, and the violet light drains from his eyes. The chamber goes dark. The carvings on the walls stop writhing, and the cultists on the floor go still. And the only light in the room is the soft white glow of the dagger in Jae-min's hand. The high priest's body crumples and hits the ground and doesn't move. The demon's gone, and the dagger's humming with a trapped malice that Jae-min can feel through the grip. He stands there, breathing hard, and his hand won't let go of the weapon. Soo-yeon limps over and puts her good hand on his shoulder and gently pries his fingers off the hilt. She wraps the dagger in a strip of cloth and tucks it into her belt, and the humming stops. It's sealed. You did it. Jae-min looks at the priest's corpse, and then at the slab where Jin-tae's body still lies, cold and dead and untouched. His father never came back, and the demon never got what it wanted, and the Black Lotus sex ritual is nothing but ash and failure. He should feel triumphant, and he doesn't. He just feels empty and tired, and his soul aches where the packs used to be. The surviving cultists start stirring, and Soo-yeon ties them with the remains of her chain, while Jae-min stands guard with no ghosts left to call. It takes an hour to clear the chamber and drag the prisoners up to the courtyard, and dawn's breaking by the time they're done. Do-yoon's still alive, and the healers say he'll make it, and the estate's a wreck, but the cult's gone, and the demon's sealed. A week later, the messenger from the capital returns with a full retinue and a royal warrant. Jae-min stands in the main hall of the Dongcheon estate, and the morning sun cuts through the broken windows, and the king's decree says he's cleared of all charges. His father's crimes are exposed, and House Hwang is restored, and the estate is his by right and by law. Soo-yeon's standing behind him with her arm in a sling and a faint smile on her face. Jae-min looks at the wreckage of the hall and the ghosts that hover at the edges of his vision, and the dagger she still carries. I'm something else now. The messenger clears his throat and pulls out a second scroll and says the king has one more request. Trouble's brewing in the northern provinces, and the reports mention walking corpses and black-robed figures, and a warlord spirit nobody's ever heard of.